Welcome back, everyone, to Big Data Days 2024. I'm super excited to be introducing our next speaker, who is going to be talking about the state of data and AI in industry in 2024. Our next speaker is Randy Bean, and he's the founder and CEO of the Data and AI Leadership Exchange. Randy has been an advisor to Fortune 500 and 1,000 organizations on data and AI leadership for more than 3 decades. He's a founder, CEO, author, speaker, senior advisor, and innovation fellow, as well as a board member. He's the best-selling author of Fail Fast, Learn Faster, Lessons in Data-Driven Leadership in the Age of Disruption, Big Data, and AI. And he's a regular contributor to Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and MIT Sloan Management Review on data and AI leadership. He was previously founder and CEO of New Vantage Partners, a data and AI leadership advisory firm to Fortune 1000 clients, which he founded in 2001. NVD was acquired by Wavestone, a Paris-based global consultancy, in 2021. Randy, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us here today. First time on Big Data Days, and I am thrilled to listen to you.
Well, thank you, John Willem. Delighted to be here. So what I'm going to do for the next period of time is I'm going to share the results with you of a survey that first started conducting in 2012 of basically Fortune 1000 and Global 2000 C executives. So the idea was to capture what their organizations and what the industry is doing relative to the adoption of data, analytics, and now AI. So moving to the next slide. Okay, there we go. Jan Willem went through my background, so nothing to add there, except for you can see that I write frequently for Harvard Business Review, Forbes, MIT Sloan Review, and formerly for the Wall Street Journal. These days, I publish about 2 articles per month in Forbes about what leading companies are doing in terms of AI adoption, use of data. I co-author a 6-part series in MIT Sloan Management Review with Tom Davenport on AI in action. So in terms of the survey, as mentioned, it started in 2012. That was the first year we've conducted it. And so it's actually turned out, not by design, but just by default, I guess, the longest running annual survey of Fortune 1000 and global data leaders. And probably this year was one of the most eventful years in the survey, because with generative AI being introduced in the fall of 2022, it really had a significant impact on the way that respondents answered the survey this year, in the sense that it really elevated the awareness of data and analytics and AI activities among these companies. So moving to the next slide, I want to give you a feel for the organizations that participated in this year's survey. So as you can see, there's a number of leading global brands, US-based Fortune 1000 companies, but also internationally based companies such as Emirates, Bentley, Unilever, among others. And then you see major global brands such as American Express, Colgate, Palmolive, MasterCard, the drug companies like Bristol Myers Squibb, General Motors, Procter & Gamble, Bloomberg, and others, just to give you an idea of the cross-section of the firms that participate. So moving to the next slide, let's dig into the data, and we'll give you a little bit of background on the participants in terms of their roles and what industries they come from. And then we'll talk about 5 key findings from the survey, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So as you can see, 50.9% of the respondents came from financial services. And the reason why financial services are such heavy participants is that they're really data businesses. Compared to 2018, there's larger representation from other industries. So this year, for example, healthcare and life sciences, there's significant representation from retail, consumer goods, and even media and entertainment. So these are all industries that have been data and analytics intensive. And in terms of the respondents, the goal was to have almost all of the respondents be C executives. So I believe this year, roughly 97% held a C executive title. And of this year's respondents, 89.8% held the title of Chief Data and Analytics Officer, Chief AI Officer, one of those configurations within their organization. And in terms of the backgrounds of the survey respondents, as you can see, it's a mix of business, technical, and analytics AI experience. So it's a diversified set of industry respondents. So let's jump into the findings on the next slide, please. Okay, so we're just coming up on the next slide, finding number 1. I'll start to speak to it while the slide's coming up. So the first finding from this year's survey is that leading companies continue investments in data and analytics with the expectation of delivering business value. And I'll share the results in a moment. Let me just ask Jan Willem if there's any questions or need any assistance in getting to the next slide.
Number 2, which is finding number 2. Are you seeing it as well?
Excuse me?
We are currently at slide number 2 with finding number 2. The companies see generative AI as the most transformative technology.
Okay, can you show slide finding number 1?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
It should be up right now.
Okay, interesting. I don't see it, but I'll read the data. So finding number 1 was leading companies continue investments in data and analytics with the expectation of delivering business value. There it is. So here's some of the findings. So we asked, are investments in data and analytics a top organizational priority within your firm? And 87.9% said yes. So good news. That's something we like to hear. Is your organization increasing its investment in data and analytics? 82.2% said yes. Again, something we like to hear. Is your organization delivering measurable business value from your data and analytics investments? 87% said yes. So that represents good results, good progress. Strong business leadership and partnership in place at our organization. 84.3% said yes. Do you view your organization as an industry leader in data and analytics? So just under half, 47.7% said yes. So that means that some of these organizations view themselves as leaders, but many others view themselves as more followers or fast followers in terms of what the industry is doing. And it's worth noting, particularly among the Fortune 1000, that 90% of Fortune 1000 companies are traditional or legacy firms. So, they're not digitally native firms. They don't have to be competing with the Amazons and Googles. They have to be competing with the other firms in their sector. So it's always important to get that sense, because I'm asked these days often about the pace of AI adoption, how quickly firms need to move. But if you're part of that 90% of the Fortune 1000 that are the traditional companies, back 25 to 30 years ago when the internet and digital was first introduced, these companies really evolved their digital strategies over many years, even decades, such that a number of those firms said to me that they accomplished more in terms of their digital strategies during the COVID period than they had in the previous 20 years. So it's important to realize that distinction there. And then lastly, on this slide, this is probably the classic challenge that continues to face many organizations, and that is that efforts to improve data quality have been successful. Only 37% say yes. So it's something that organizations continue to struggle with. Moving to finding number 2, which is companies see generative AI as potentially the most transformative technology in a generation. And there's a lot of data here, so I'll just highlight a few things. So here's some of the good news and interesting news. Investments in generative AI are a top organizational priority. 62.3% say yes, so not bad. Are you increasing investment in generative AI? 89.6% say yes, so that's directionally good. Do you believe generative AI has the potential to be the most transformative technology in a generation, and maybe all AI for that matter? And 64.2% said yes. So that's interesting in terms of how organizations are thinking. We asked, is there a need for safeguards and guardrails for governing generative AI? 99.0% said yes. I'm not sure what the other 1% were thinking, but that's another question. We asked whether safeguards and guardrails for generative AI are in place, and 62.9% said yes. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And then we also asked, is the talent in place to responsibly implement generative AI? And roughly half said yes and half said no. So clearly there's a challenge as well as an opportunity for organizations to build the talent base that they need to move forward with these efforts. And I think some of those points were made with the previous panel. Another question that we asked was the state of generative AI implementation efforts. So this is worth noting. 60.4% said they were at the experimentation and testing stage. 24.5% said they were implemented in limited production. 6.6% said that they were in the planning and design stage. Only 4.7% said they were implemented in production at scale. So again, a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential, but still in the early stages. And in terms of the opportunity as well as the danger, as you can see, the majority or the plurality of respondents said achieving exponential productivity gains was the greatest opportunity at 49.1%. Other areas that were mentioned significantly were liberating knowledge workers from mundane tasks to focus on more critical thinking, synthesis, 23.6%, and improved customer service and experience, 22.6%. And in terms of risks, the biggest risk was seen as the spread of misinformation or disinformation at 44.3%, along with ethical bias at 23.6%, and job loss and job displacement at 5.7%, which also begs the question of whether one takes a optimistic or a pessimistic view in terms of the capabilities that AI brings to organizations. Moving to finding number 3, this really delves into the nature of the chief data officer role, the chief data and analytics officer role, and even these days now it's becoming the chief data and analytics and AI officer at some organizations. So when we first conducted this survey in 2012, only 12% of organizations said that they had appointed a chief data officer or equivalent. By this year, it was 83.2%. So clearly the role has been accepted and has been adopted, but at the same time, organizations continue to struggle with the success of the role. So there's been very high turnover. I've written in Harvard Business Review on that subject with Tom Davenport, where the average CDO tenure has been around 2 years. In some organizations, it seems that that's even been decreasing. We ask here whether the role is successful and established. The good news is that there is a sharp increase from 2023, where it was only roughly 1 in 3 or 35.5%, to this year, where it was more than half, 51%. But 42.7% still indicated that they were struggling with turnover and the role was nascent and evolving. This shouldn't be surprising in a lot of ways, because if you think of the CDO role as being more or less a 15-year-old role at this point in time, that's pretty young in terms of organizations. A generation ago, the chief information officer was a new role, and the joke among many folks in the industry was CIO stood for career is over. So organizations are continuing to experiment, find out what the best configurations, skill sets, reporting relationships are for the chief data officer role. It's notable that, and I'll just point one other piece of data on this slide, Most organizations, they say that the role is still not well understood within their organization. And moving to the next page on additional data from finding number 3 is that there's still it's still in progress in terms of who has primary responsibility for data and analytics. You know, some of the good news is that a majority, maybe 2/3 of organizations now, that resides with the chief data CDO, the CDAO, but in some organizations, there's still no single point of accountability, or it resides with the chief information officer, or it's decentralized in a federated environment. Also, good news from the data leader's perspective is that more and more chief data officers are reporting to the president, CEO, or chief operating officer. So this year it's roughly 44%. Fewer are reporting to the chief information officer. So more and more we're seeing the CDO become more of a business role and less of a technical role. We also asked some questions about the mandate of the CDO and just some key points here. We asked whether analytics is now part of the CDO role within your organization. A significant majority, 70.8%, said it was. We asked whether generative AI was part of the CDO mandate. 61% said it was. We also asked whether it should be part of the CDO mandate, and nearly 80% said yes. And again, this relates to the respondents to the surveys, which were largely chief data officers. So the chief data officers believe that AI should be part of their remit. We see some organizations, roughly 1/3 of organizations now, taking a look at whether there's a need for an independent chief AI officer. So this is very much a work in progress. And one other key point to make relative to the role of the chief data officer, and that is over the past 15 years, we've seen the role significantly evolve from what was initially a defensive role set up to satisfy risk and regulatory requirements. Once those were satisfied, it's evolved significantly into an offensive role focused on business growth, customer satisfaction, developing new capabilities. One thing that's important to think about in terms of as AI is introduced into the equation, we've talked about the guardrails and safeguards that need to be put in place. So initially, for many organizations, the chief AI officer role or AI responsibilities, much of that will be focused on defensive activities until organizations have the trust and confidence that the guardrails and safeguards have been put in place, that they can move to some of the more offensive and business-oriented activities. So this is very much a work in progress that we're living in real time as we speak. Moving to finding number 4. This is interesting because for all of the effort that's taken place over the past 15 years to develop data and AI, data and analytics and AI capabilities within organizations, companies recognize that integrating data and AI in traditional business processes and changing organizational culture requires time and commitment. And this refers back a little bit to the point I made about 90% of Fortune 1000 companies are basically legacy companies that have existed for long periods of time. So any type of change requires significant development of or change to existing processes, people behavior, skill sets, etc. So these are things that don't take place overnight. So there's both good news and bad news in these findings, or glass half empty or half full, depending upon your perspective. So we asked 5 key questions here in terms of measuring the progress of data initiatives. We asked, are you driving business innovation with data? This year, 77% said yes, which is quite good, and a good improvement over last year's 59.5%. And again, we see a lot of this fueled by the interest in generative AI. We asked, are you competing on data and analytics? This year it was roughly, or it was half, 50%. 50% were, 50% weren't. That was about a 20% increase over the 40.8% who were in 2023. So again, some notable progress to be made. Are you managing business data as a business asset? 49.1% said yes, a sharp increase over the 39.5% from 2023, but still over half of organizations are not. The two areas that have been the biggest struggle for most organizations, one is, have you created a data-driven organization? The good news is that there was a sharp improvement this year. Last year it was only 23.9%, so very low, less than 1 in 4. This year it was up to 48.1%, so heading in the right direction, but still the point that half of the organizations are and half of the organizations are not. And have you established a data and analytics culture? The cultural issues have really been the biggest barriers for most organizations, and last year was roughly only 1 in 5 that could answer that question in the affirmative. This year it was roughly 2 in 5, or 42.6%. So a sharp move in the right direction, but still a lot of work to be done, which also points to that there's just going to be an ongoing need and a tremendous demand for data analytics and AI talent and expertise. So that's the good news, that there's a lot of work to be done. And so there's going to be a lot of need for data and analytics and AI expertise and professionals. And to the final point here, the principal challenge to becoming data-driven continues to be less about technology and much more about people and culture and process and organizations and change. Change is never easy. People will always, or often, the biggest advocates of change, they'll advocate change in others, but when it comes to changing their own behavior, they're less apt to adopt that quickly. So this remains a challenge for a vast majority of organizations. And the final finding, finding 5, is that companies believe data and AI safeguards and governance are essential, but much more needs to be done. So the slide will be coming up momentarily, but just to share the key findings, we asked, are data and AI ethics a top corporate priority? And 73.8% of organizations said that it was. We asked, is the board of directors well-versed in data and AI issues and responsibilities? And just over half, 51.4%, said that they were. So about half said that they weren't. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of educating board of directors, C-suites, in particular on data and AI issues and responsibilities. We asked, are there well-established policies and practices in place around data and AI responsibility and ethics? 42.3% said yes. Not much change over the past few years. So again, a majority of organizations said that it wasn't. And then we asked, has the industry done enough to address data and AI ethics? And only 15.9% said yes. So this continues to be a work in progress, a sensitive topic. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. If you're interested in additional reading, as mentioned, write regularly for Harvard Business Review, Forbes, MIT Sloan, and on the next slide, there's some of the recent articles that have published. Among those, one entitled in Harvard Business Review, Generative AI is Making Companies More Data-Oriented. Another one from last year, Why Chief Data and AI Officers Are Set Up to Fail. In Forbes, I write a series of case studies. Among the most recent is one about data and AI at ExxonMobil. I believe the title of that was that for ExxonMobil, data and AI is much more than just the new oil. Also, recent articles have included stories about Schneider Electric and how they're using data and AI in the energy industry. Have also written about entertainment, Universal Music, Creative Artists Agency, have written about the National Football League, and also major banks such as JP Morgan and credit card companies have written extensively about MasterCard, American Express, among others. So happy to answer any and all questions that you may have.
much.
So, yeah, and well, let me know if you have questions.
And I'm happy to moderate a few questions that have been coming in on the left. The first question that I see coming in is, how do organizations address concerns around algorithmic bias and fairness in data and AI initiatives? Is that part of the things that you research as well?
Well, I know it's something that a lot of organizations struggle with, and it has greater awareness in some organizations than others. For example, MasterCard and Joanne Stonier, who was their longtime chief data officer and now is their data fellow, has been an advocate and very has spoken to audiences globally at the World Economic Summit Forum and other places, and she's been an advocate of strong ethics capabilities, and MasterCard's established an institute for the ethical use of data and AI. So some organizations are much further ahead, and it's a key part of their focus because their data is used widely, and they're also pulling information together from a variety of sources. I think for other firms, they're much further behind in terms of following. And relative to legislation, I know that the European community has passed recent legislation, but there's really little that's been done in the United States to this point in time.
Okay, and I think that's something that is likely going to be an issue that's going to be considered in the next few years. So I'm already looking forward to your 2025 report.
Thank you.
Good. Second question that came in is from Lewis. And Lewis is saying, are there any significant differences in data and AI leadership approaches between Fortune 500 companies and other types of organizations?
The way I'd answer that is, for this survey over the past 12 years, have really focused on Fortune 1000 companies and large companies because they're bellwethers and they represent so much of the economic dollars that are spent on data and analytics and AI. So I've really focused on the largest organizations and what they're doing as opposed to the middle market and smaller companies. I think leadership can come from all levels, but the largest companies have the dollars to invest and the people to put behind these initiatives. JP Morgan has made AI adoption one of its primary responsibilities, and recently became the first Fortune 1000 organization that I'm aware of that named their chief data and analytics officer to the operating committee of the company. So that's a first in my experience.
Absolutely. Speaking about that rate of change, I also have another very great question, which is coming in from Muradi Narayam. And he says it takes time to create a golden copy for any organization. Mostly it's 5 years on average. If the CDO term is less than 2 years and your data shows a high term, how does it impact organizations to achieve their goals ultimately their business decisions?
I think that's a great question because it really points to that data about the challenges that organizations continue to face after 15 years after the establishment of the chief data officer role. Just the fact that last year it was still only 1 in 5 organizations that said they developed a data culture, and roughly whatever the number was, less than 1 in 3 that said that they had a data-driven organization. So even though there was some improvement this year, as generative AI significantly increased the awareness of data within organizations, it continues to be an ongoing struggle. Many years ago, early on in my career, I had a mentor, and he was CIO, Chief Information Officer, one of the largest banks. And he said to me, Randy, he said, with the big companies, nothing ever happens in less than a decade. And I thought that was incredibly cynical. But the truth of the matter is that larger companies tend to move, larger legacy companies tend to move more slowly, and they really only need to move at the same pace or a little bit faster than their competitors. So adoption takes time. That's why we all have to develop a plan, stick with that plan, but we have to put things in perspective and be realistic in terms of expectations as well.
Noted. And I think that taking that longer term perspective is why this research is so valuable, because you're not just taking this snapshot over this one period of time or 1 year only, looking at it from how things evolve over multiple years. I think that that's really the value that you're showing here today.
Well, thank you.
Good. I have one last question that just came in, and that one is from Katina Nguyen. And the question is, what cultural shifts are necessary within an organization to prioritize data-driven decision-making over the more traditional intuition-based approaches?
Well, I think the good news is that organizations are just, they're becoming more and more comfortable with data over time. And as AI becomes more prevalent and accessible to people at all levels within an organization, and we all know that great AI is dependent upon great data, it just raises the level of awareness. So, if you're a data professional, I've been in the field for a generation, 35 years. 35 years ago, people were saying to me, how can we use the data we have to make more informed decisions and better serve our customers and operate more efficiently? So the questions that are being asked today are really the same questions that were being asked 35 years ago. But the difference today is the speed of processing, the exponential processing power, the vast and diverse forms of data that are available. And so over time, an appreciation of data and how data and analytics can be used it seeps into the consciousness and it becomes embedded. And if you watch professional sports, it used to be that coaches and managers acted upon their hunches and their instincts. And now if you watch the broadcast, they have more and more data about, average time it takes for the ball to move from here to there, or a defender or offensive person to move from spot to spot, and how that correlates to performance. So it's becoming completely data-driven in terms of the metrics that they use and how they evaluate. They bring in new athletes. So over time, data and analytics is absolutely being adopted, and it's just moving at a natural evolution.
Great. I think those are some great closing remarks, Randy. It's definitely an evolution on how things are progressing. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. For everyone who's interested to have another peek at the data, the handout is listed on the right-hand side of your screen. Under the handout section, you can download the presentation with the numbers. So in case you would like to review that a little bit more in detail, you can do that over there. With that, Randy, I would like to thank you very much for being part of our presentation and our conference today. Thanks for answering all those in-depth questions. It was really a great pleasure to listen to you and also to kind of see all the great work that you're doing in terms of capturing some information that is very crucial in today's day and age. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today. Nice to be with you.
Absolutely. Now, for everyone else who is listening, in the next hour, we have 2 upcoming sessions again. In track number 1, which is going to be on my side, we will have Kartikeyan Ilangovan, who is the head of business intelligence at Neiman Marcus, and he is going to be talking about generative AI, enhancing self-service analytics, and bridging the data literacy divide. So I think that that's going to be a great session. And on the right-hand side, we will have Pankaj Zanki, who is a technical analyst leader at Sapiens. And this is also promising to be a very great session because he's going to be talking about the insurance revolution and how AI and big data reshape the industry. So again, tough choice that you would need to make. In the next hour, we will be reconvening exactly on the hour for what is already going to be our last breakout sessions before the keynote. Thanks so much for joining this session, and we will see you back again shortly.